Now, one of three lawmakers negotiating that deal, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Do you have a deal?
Well, we do have a bipartisan deal. We're finishing the text right now. And the question is whether Republicans are going to listen to Donald Trump, who wants to preserve chaos at the border because he thinks that it's a winning political issue for him, or whether we are going to pass legislation which would be the biggest bipartisan reform of our border and immigration laws in 40 years and would give the president of the United States, whether that president is a Republican or a Democrat, new important power to be able to better manage the flow of people across the border. We are sort of finalizing the last pieces of text right now. This bill could be ready to be on the floor of the United States Senate next week, but it won't be if Republicans decide that they want to keep this issue unsettled for political purposes. So I was glad to hear the president come out and speak forcefully in favor of this bill. I am hopeful that we will still have enough Republicans in the Senate who want to fix the problem at the border rather than just do Donald Trump's bidding. But we will see over the next 24 to 48 hours whether that's true.
I want to get to some of the more specific substance in this deal in a minute, but because you mentioned Donald Trump and the role that he is now playing actively, apparently lobbying his fellow Republicans in, never mind the House, but also in the Senate to kill the bill. Are you confident that you even have the Republican support in the Senate? What are you hearing?
Well, I hope that we have the Republican support for this bill, and I think that there are many Republicans in the Senate who are sincere about trying to come together and do our job. I mean, listen, right now the president does not have the tools that he needs in order to stop the flow of 10,000 people a day to better manage the asylum system. So let's come together and give him those tools. But let's also be cognizant of the fact that if we don't pass this bill, Ukraine won't get its military funding. Remember, the whole reason that we are talking about borders because Republicans have said they will let Vladimir Putin march his army in and through Ukraine if we don't pass a bill that includes border provisions and Ukraine funding. So the consequence of failure here is not just that we keep immigration as an open issue available for Donald Trump to exploit in the next election. It is also that Ukraine loses this war and that Russia marches its army to the edge of Europe. That would be catastrophic for the United States and for the whole world. So the stakes here are high. The consequences of failure are enormous. And I do have confidence that enough Republicans in the Senate are going to join us to pass this bipartisan legislation, potentially as early as the next week or two. And we can show that Washington can still stand up and work on these big problems, even if Donald Trump is rooting for chaos.
Yeah, and you know as well as I do that a lot of Republicans don't hear that as a carrot because they don't want to support funding for Ukraine. But I want to look specifically more at what is in this deal that you are talking about right now. President Biden says that it will allow him to close the border entirely if migrants crossing exceed a certain level. He says he would exercise that authority as soon as it is signed into law. Is he right that what you were talking about would grant him authority to close the border?
So we'll be able to talk in more detail about this proposal once the text is written. Obviously, we want to make sure that our colleagues are the first ones who see the final product. But yes, this bill will include an ability for the president to shut down the border in between the ports of entry when crossings reach catastrophically high levels. Not permanently, but until we are able to better process people who are crossing the border. It also reforms the asylum system. Right now, as you know, Dana, it takes sometimes 5 to 10 years for somebody to get their asylum claim heard. That's not fair to anybody, including the migrant, that it takes that long. We would shorten that time frame down to 6 months in some cases, and then it would get people work permits faster. Right now, what we know is that these people who are coming into the country are, on our streets or in our homeless shelters. So we would make sure that folks who are coming to the country who are applying for asylum have the ability to work. That's something that our mayors and our governors really want.
Senator, Republicans, including the House Speaker, argue, a lot of them, not the ones you're dealing with, but a lot of them argue that President Biden already has the authority that he needs to secure the border. And they're criticizing this deal that you've been negotiating. What do you make of that, of the notion that President Biden already has tools and he doesn't need more yet?
Well, it's just not true. It's a political talking point. Those same Republicans in the House of Representatives who say President Biden has the tools introduced H.R. 2, which is a massive border reform bill. They said it was one of their most important priorities. And so Republicans have said openly that they want to pass border and immigration reform. All of a sudden, they are against border and immigration reform because they are worried it's actually going to pass. And many Republicans in the House and some in the Senate actually have no plans to help the president control the border because they want to keep the border in a chaotic situation for political purposes. Remember, Donald Trump didn't do a much better job. Presentations reached a 10-year high at the border under Donald Trump. The only reason that fewer people started to show up was because COVID hit and nobody moved anywhere. So when Donald Trump says, I didn't need any new powers, that's just not true. Presentations at the border spiked under Donald Trump. It didn't come down until COVID hit.
Senator Chris Murphy, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on this morning.
Thank you.